it's close enough. Everybody ready to go on the record? All right, and your name was, ma'am? Okay. All right. Well, let's, before we go on the record, if you have anything that looks sort of like this, if you could make sure that it's either off or muted so that we're not interrupted as we proceed through this hearing. And I do have your card. Thank you. All right, let's go on the record. Good morning. Today is Monday, December 5th, 2022. Pursuant to notice, this final hearing is being held in Pensacola, Florida, before the Division of Administrative Hearings. I'm Gary Early, the Administrative Law Judge presiding. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. The case before me is Jacqueline Rogers versus Escambia County, case number 22-3224 GM. This case is brought to challenge Escambia County Ordinance, the Escambia County Ordinance, which amends the Escambia County Midwest Sector Plan to remove a parcel totaling 99.45 acres, plus or minus, and amending the Escambia County Comprehensive Plan 2030 future land use map by assigning a future land use category of mixed-use suburban to that 99.45 plus or minus acre parcel. Petitioner alleges that the ordinance is not internally consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Escambia County Comprehensive Plan as required by Section 163.3177 paren 1 and 2, is not based on relevant data and analysis as required by Section 163.31771F, and is not in compliance as defined in Section 163.31841B Florida statutes. Petitioner has the burden to prove that the issues in dispute are not fairly debatable, and findings of fact must be based on a preponderance of the evidence. This hearing will be governed by Division of Administrative Hearings Procedural Rules, Chapter 28-106, Florida statutes, and the Florida Administrative Procedures Act, Chapter 120, Florida statutes. So with that, could I have the parties make their appearances, starting with petitioner?
Should I stand or?
No.
I'm Jacqueline Rogers, the petitioner.
All right. And for Escambia County?
Steve West with the County Attorney's Office.
All right. All right. Couple of preliminary matters. As you know, you probably know, I know Ms. Rogers, you've been through these proceedings before. Hearsay in a Chapter 120 proceeding is admissible, though it is not sufficient in and of itself to support a finding of fact unless it's corroborated by other admissible evidence that would be admissible over objection in a civil trial. Therefore, I intend to admit hearsay evidence. I will give it the weight that it merits once it's in the record. If you have an objection and you want to preserve the record and note that it is hearsay, feel free to make the objection. I'll be overruling it, but you know it's good to have it in the record to mark the spot. In addition, if something is hearsay but it's being admitted for something other than the truth of the matter asserted, please point that out, because then it's not hearsay. Or if it comes under an exception to the hearsay rule, please point that out as well, and I'll make a ruling as to the extent that it is hearsay or not hearsay. Second, as set forth in the order of pre-hearing instructions, I intend to take official recognition of all statutory law, rules, resolutions of the Florida legislature, rules promulgated by governmental agencies, and published in the Florida Administrative Code, agency final orders, and duly enacted ordinances and resolutions of Florida municipalities and counties. I have taken official recognition of that, so if there are any of those things you want to rely on as we proceed, or in your proposed orders in this case, don't feel like you have to file a motion for official recognition. I think I have one motion to supplement respondents' disclosure of exhibits, which is a comprehensive plan amendment compliance evaluation. It was filed on December 1st, so I don't have a response, although Ms. Rogers, I think in the pre-hearing stipulation, you did identify one exhibit that was filed after the deadline for filing. I don't know if this is that
No,
exhibit.
that's an additional one that was filed even after that, so
All
I'm
right.
objecting to both of them.
All right. Mr. West, can you tell me what these are and what role they'll be playing in this case? And then I'll make a ruling, and I'll probably have some additional questions, Ms. Rogers, for you. Mr. West?
Yes, Your Honor. One of our expert witnesses, Ken Metcalf, prepared a report that we would like to enter into evidence. He will actually testify here today. So the report is to help supplement the evidence that will be provided, and he can do that orally if necessary. He prepared a draft, and that was the only document that was available at the time of the filing deadline last Wednesday. And so we filed a draft, and then the next morning when the report was available, we filed the motion to supplement with the final report, which is actually shorter. The alternative is, if you're not willing to consider the final report, even though it was a few hours late, he can testify to fill in the gaps and the refinements that he made on the final report, and we'll rely on the draft. I think the other thing that Ms. Rogers is referring to is that the draft was provided to her within the timelines set forth in the pre-hearing order, but I think she's thinking that she's entitled to receive it by 5 o'clock, which is the filing deadline for the DOA clerk. So I think that's the objection that she has, but I don't want to speak for her. She can certainly address it.
So it was filed at some point after, on that date after 5 o'clock?
That's correct.
All right, Ms. Rogers?
The first report, there's two.
This is the draft? I guess there's
The
a
draft,
draft
okay.
report and a final
Right,
report.
so the
okay.
draft was sent to me, I believe, I have the email here, at 11:30 at night when I was asleep. You know, that was the disclosure deadline that we were supposed to exchange our deadline. So, you know, if I knew that I could work throughout that day too and come up with some more exhibits, I probably would have done that too. So that was my objection on that it didn't make the DOA deadline, or even the local deadline, you know, because we're an hour behind. Of course, the regular one was disclosed to me on the 30th. That was 9 days after the deadline to disclose exhibits to each other. So, and there are substantial changes in the report. He says it's shortened, but he's added exhibits to it. He's added exhibits, and he's changed his analysis in there.
Okay. Are these exhibits that were not available prior to the disclosure of the final report?
Even with the late one on the 21st that came at, you know, around 11:30, or I'd have to check the time, but that, yeah, they were not in there. So there's about 4 other exhibits internal in his report that he added.
All right. All right. I think I'm inclined to allow the draft report at such time as it's offered. I'm not going to exclude it based on a filing deficiency. I think filing is 5 o'clock in Tallahassee at the clerk's office, but unless you can tell me how you're prejudiced, I mean, I understand you'd like to have some more time, but unless you can convince me that you're prejudiced in allowing it to come in, I'm inclined at such time as it's offered to overlook the deadline, since it was filed on the same date.
I guess the prejudice would be that if I had known I had that same time, you know, constraint, there was a lot more that maybe I could have refined on my end also.
Okay. All right. I think I'm going to allow the draft in. The final is when did you say the final was filed? Was that
The
on
final
first?
was filed the next morning after the filing deadline, because the DOA clerk's office wouldn't accept anything after the the 5 o'clock deadline. But
When did
it was
Ms.
provided to
Rogers get the
Ms.
file?
Rogers that day, within a matter of minutes after the deadline.
And Ms.
Nine-
Rogers, you would have the same objection
It
that
was
you
9
didn't
days
have.
after the disclosure, that we were supposed to, I was already working on the draft report.
Right.
I didn't know it was a draft, but I was already working on the report, and then, 9 days later, I get a new report with new information, significant, I think, in some areas, changes, on opinion.
All right. I'm going to withhold ruling on the final report. I'll allow the author in their testimony to discuss the changes. If they're substantial, I may not give them much weight, but at least I'm going to give you an opportunity to cross-examine and parse out what might be the changes and how they would be different from the first draft that you had, more or less timely. So I'm going to withhold ruling on the final. So, Mr. West, I think you'll need to have the author testify as to what the changes might be and the extent to which they're substantial or not.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
I have a question, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
If he wouldn't be allowed to use it as an exhibit, potentially, would he be allowed to still testify orally to what he would have put in the exhibit?
I think, yes. I mean, he's going to be allowed to offer testimony, and if his testimony is that there are elements of the draft report that he no longer stands behind, then he can do that. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with other exhibits. I'm a little more bothered by that. If they were exhibits that weren't disclosed earlier and timely in accordance with the order for pre-hearing instructions, I'm likely to exclude them. If they're in the record already, if they've been disclosed and now he's referring to them, it's still a little problematic, but I'll at least give it some thought at that time.
Okay.
So, all right. I've received the joint pre-hearing stipulation. It looks like the parties spent some time on this, and I'm appreciative of that. I have gone through, I'm not sure exactly the significance of it yet, but I see that you have excluded certain paragraphs in your petition, so I've marked them on my copy, and I'm sure that you'll be able to explain to me as we go through this. The elements. I'm going to take evidence today, and whatever evidence I receive today will be the basis for my recommended order. And then I have a list of exhibits, and those that are objected to. Do the parties want to introduce the exhibits that are not that have no objections at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. That would be my preference, is that of those that are stipulated between the parties is acceptable, that we would not have to go through the formal process of entering them into evidence. And so if we may consider those as entered, that would speed things up, I think.
All right. I'm big on efficiency, so let me start with,
And, Your Honor, the only other objection I had was for their Exhibit 5, I believe, based on hearsay, but since you said you were going to admit it, I'm fine with that.
okay. Yeah, I mean, notes of a conversation, I mean, that's almost double hearsay. I mean, it's a hearsay document that's relating matters that would of themselves be hearsay. So how much weight I'll ultimately give that is going to be, somebody's going to have to convince me that there's some non-hearsay evidence to corroborate the substance. But if you've withdrawn your objection to 5, so you have no objection to any then of respondents 1 through 21?
Correct.
All right,
Well,
so,
no, 20, I still have an objection to 21, which is, that's
oh, okay, 21 is the
the draft.
is the draft?
Yeah, and would you be replacing with the second one?
No,
or
I'm going to,
It'd be additional, okay.
it'd be
So
additional. So
21
I
and-
have
21
21
and
would be the
22.
draft, and then 22 would be the final. Okay. All right, so without objection, Escambia County Exhibits 1 through 20 are received in evidence. And I'm going to withhold ruling on 21 and 22, which are comprehensive plan amendment compliance evaluation prepared by Kenneth Metcalf with attachments and exhibits. 21 being the draft, 22 being the final. And I'll withhold any ruling on those two exhibits until such time as they are offered in evidence during, I presume, Mr. Metcalf's testimony. And then petitioners' exhibits 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37 are all received in evidence. I will note that some of those are provisions of either ordinances or statutory law, so they're also subject to official recognition, but it doesn't hurt to have them in. So all of those petitioners' exhibits that I have referenced are received in evidence, and I'm withholding ruling on 3, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 21, 22, and 30, and 38. All right. Anything else that we, do the parties anticipate a transcript will be ordered?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so we'll discuss the timing elements of that, but it helps me to know that I'll have a transcript. I do tend to take fairly copious notes, so if I'm looking down through parts of this proceeding, I promise I'm paying attention. But I like to have, you know, it was one of those things from law school for some reason. If I wrote things down as verbatim as I could, they tended to imprint a little bit better. So it helps me to take notes, and I typically do. All right. Anything else that we need to take up on a preliminary matter before we start taking evidence?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Oh, and I do see that the parties have stipulated to the expertise of 4 witnesses. Looks like 3 of the, let me find it. I set down my pre-hearing step too soon. Where did I put it? There it is. All right, so I have stipulated expertise for Andrew Holmer, Allison Lindsay, Terry Malone, and I'm sorry, was it Albrecht? Who was the other, Ms. Rogers, who was the other expert that the stipulation, because I believe it was one of yours.
I didn't believe that we had stipulated to any of them, Mr. West.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I read that there were the expertise.
I have expert witnesses, but we didn't stipulate, I don't believe.
All right. Give me 1 second, please. Yeah, I have facts admitted that will require no proof at hearing, paragraph 3 indicated that Horace Jones, Allison Lindsay, Terry Malone, and Andrew Holmer are experts in the field of planning, zoning, and growth management in accordance with the Escambia County Land Development Code. Is that
I have no objection to that. There's staff here, that's fine.
okay? All right. So then for those 4 witnesses, then we don't need, I'll accept by stipulation that they are experts in the field and qualified to explain some of the facts to me in a manner that I can better process them. And I will receive them as experts in the field of planning, zoning, and growth
I have no
management,
objection to that.
and
There's
will
staff
accept
here.
their
That's fine.
testimony in the
Okay.
form of opinion. All right.
All
So
right.
then for those four witnesses, then we don't need, do we have some feedback coming through?
Yes, Your Honor, I don't know, I think that might be distracting. I don't know if we have somebody who can,
Okay. Oh, okay, it's done. We got it. All right. Anything else on a preliminary matter that we need to take up before we start taking evidence?
no, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Rogers?
No.
All right, would either party like to make an opening statement before we get going?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Rogers?
So thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity to address the court today. I petition the court because I believe that I will prove today by testimony and evidence that this land use change, this comprehensive plan change, was done without Escambia County bringing the data and analysis required by Florida Statute 163-3177 to support this change. In fact, Development Services staff didn't really feel like they needed to do the data and analysis for this amendment. This comprehensive plan amendment involves a removal of 2 parcels from a long-range plan of Escambia County, the Midwest Sector Plan. Adopted over 11 years ago, this plan sought to bring about some innovative planning to the central part of Escambia County to direct growth to the new rural area in an orderly fashion and to prevent sprawl, while still providing some rural character of the community, still preserving, rather. Unfortunately for the citizens, the sector plan has become somewhat of a political football at this point. At least one pro-development commissioner has pushed for not the complete removal of the sector plan, as it gave increased development rights to larger developers on previously rural and agricultural lands, but these opt-out requests have been pushed in the low-density areas of the plan, natural resource protecting, habitat preserving, and environmentally sensitive areas of the plan in the conservation neighborhood land use areas, where these subject amendments are. By slowly chipping away at the sector plan piece by piece, unsupported opt-out, by politically directed but unsupported by true data and analysis, comprehensive plan amendments, Escambia County will eventually render this plan useless, which will be a loss to many residents and all the taxpayers, as Escambia County has already invested over $1 million, is the last I heard, into developing and implementing this plan. So as a pro se petitioner, I've lacked the ability or the resources to retain lawyers or professional planners in appealing these unsupported plan amendments. So why am I here today? This plan, these subject properties are literally in my backyard. I would be substantially negatively affected by this unsupported plan amendment, which I believe, and I intend to prove today, is a truly bad decision. So the area of the subject amendments lacks the facilities and services to support such a change, and it would be harmful to the environment and nearby natural resources to have this increased density and intensity on these parcels. And it would undermine the ability of those properties remaining in the conservation areas like our neighborhood to achieve the goals and objective of this land use as it's stated in Chapter 16, which is the sector plan chapter in the Escambia Comprehensive Plan. And it would also go against the goals and objective of the detailed specific area plan that was adopted as a plan amendment as well. So I believe, Your Honor, that I will show today that Escambia County did not do the full data and analysis intended to support this planning decision. And when significant data and testimony was available to them, they ignored it. And they deferred true analysis until after development. They intended to defer true analysis until after development rights of this much more dense and intense future land use was already granted. Escambia County has no currency provisions for roads, has no concurrency, I'm sorry. It has no school concurrency or recreation concurrency provisions. There are no impact fees to fund these facilities. Therefore, it is essential that we get it right and make these important comprehensive plan changes, it's essential that we get it right when we're making these essential comp plan changes, especially future land use map amendments. As DEO and the state agencies, the Department of Economic Opportunity and the state agencies no longer have the authority to comment or oppose actions that don't impact important state facilities or resources, the burden of challenging these unsupported plan amendments unfortunately falls on the citizen, which I'm sure this court can appreciate as a burdensome task. And in Escambia County, it's unfortunately fraught with a lot of political opposition and attack. Escambia County has the staff and the money to hire an outside consultant to come in after the fact and try to quickly do the data and analysis that they never think that they need to do here until they're challenged. And that is exactly what happened here. But as I feel I will prove today, even that effort was inadequate and erroneous. I believe that I will show today through exhibits and testimony that Escambia County did not react appropriately to the data already available to them. They ignored testimony at hearing, and they failed to truly analyze the maximum effects that this future land use assignment could cause. The county had already scrutinized data and analysis from when the sector plan and the detailed specific area plans were adopted. That was already scrutinized by the DCA and the DEO later on. And the county failed to bring any alternative data to show, in this case, in this plan amendment, why this change is appropriate or any valid planning reason for this amendment. I believe that this court, in the end, will conclude that based on the testimony today and the exhibits, and that Escambia County Ordinance number 2022-38, amending the comprehensive plan, is not in compliance as that term is defined in the Florida statute. Thank you.
All right, Mr. West, would you like to make an opening, or you can certainly reserve if you would like?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd prefer to reserve that opportunity until we put on our case.
All right. All right. Well, with that, Ms. Rogers, you having the burden, you go first, so you may call your first witness.
Your Honor, I'd like to call my first witness, Barbara Albrecht, please.
Okay, Ms. Albrecht. I think we've decided you'll be sitting right up here. And if I could have you remain standing.
Sure.
Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And your full name, please.
Barbara Birgit Albrecht.
All right, please be seated. It's a little awkward having you in front of your, of Ms. Rogers, but hopefully the,
Excuse me, to make it sit right here too, if you want, what about she sit right there, please?
I will do whatever you would like me to do.
however you want to do it. I'm not inconvenienced a bit, but, I'll tell you what, if you can move that table back, maybe just so that the witness will be a little more in line with each of the parties unless it's going to be pulling wires. No, it looks like it's going to be yanking
Yes, sir,
wires.
there's only so
Okay.
far we can,
Can we move
Okay.
that microphone so I can?
yeah, let's do that.
All right.
We can scoot it back a little bit.
We'll figure it out. Don't worry about, it's probably more important that you face Ms. Rogers or Mr. West when you're responding to questions. Actually, it's more important that you face Ms. Owens.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Ms. Odom. But
Ms.
we'll
Odom.
figure it out. That works. I think we can all hear. All right.
Excuse me, Your Honor, could you state your name for me?
Yes, I'm Judge Gary Early. Just like early in the
EAR?
morning.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And as we go through, I over my time as an ALJ, I do, since I'm a finder of fact, I always take my role in knowing what the facts are seriously. So I may once in a while jump in with a question of my own. I'll try not to step on your questions and disrupt things, but I may or may not have questions as we go through. All right, Ms. Rogers?
Okay, good morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Sure. Barbara Birgit Albrecht.
Ms. Albrecht, can you please tell the court where you're currently employed?
Yes. So I receive a paycheck from the University of West Florida. I work in the Center for Environmental Diagnostics and Bioremediation, and I do water quality sampling and work.
Okay, so what positions or jobs do you have at those places? Did that pretty much cover it, or?
So I work in the field, and I take students out in the field and collect water quality data, basically to have a better understanding of the health of our waters. I go to a lot of inland areas, so small communities, little branches, creeks, streams that flow into rivers and carry all kinds of biological and chemical information with them. Right now, I'm finishing a report for an intensive 7-month study where I was collecting data from the upper watersheds in southern Alabama. So up in the Perdido area, up in the Escambia-Conecuh River watershed, and the Yellow Shoal.
And before your current positions, can you briefly discuss your employment history? If we could put up Petitioner Exhibit 1. That's your.
Sure. So I have a pretty vast history. I wear many hats. I have worked with academia, business, government, and NGOs. I have a true love for aquaculture, which deals a lot with water quality. So I've worked with rearing freshwater prawns, but also basically hobby fish. I worked with the EPA, culturing a lot of bioassay organisms, and actually then use them for testing. We call that dose them, kill them, and count them. I've worked for consulting firms where I've chased chemicals that basically originated on land, got into the groundwater, and moved their way through wetlands. I have a background in aquatic toxicology. I've worked for a group called CTEC, the Society for Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, and helped oversee water quality issues in the U.S. in different regions, EPA regions. Worked with a lot of NGOs. In fact, I inherited one in 2010. And I try, through my background, to educate young people, whoever is interested in the environment, how all these pieces and parts fit together. I basically see that we have a beautiful community here in Northwest Florida. I've been a resident for 40 years, and we're kind of taking the environment for granted, which is one of the reasons I'm here today testifying, because the sector plan was a really wonderful approach for protecting our sensitive lands and our rural communities, but most importantly, our waters.
Could you briefly describe, Ms. Albrecht, your educational background?
Mm-hmm. I have a Bachelor's of Science from Marine Biology from the University of West Florida. So it's kind of funny because I am working in the same building that I graduated from in '87, and I'm sure there's still DNA from me in the building. But yeah, so I still work with the university. I work with students. This nonprofit that I inherited, the Brim Fishermen Association, they've been around for 50 years, and I inherited them in 2010. So part of that process was maintaining a water quality sampling program that we had. So I take students out in the field, show them how to sample, how to be safe, and we come back to the lab and analyze our work.
Okay, so you mentioned the Brim Fishermen Association. Are there other organizations or professional organizations that you're involved with?
Mm-hmm. I like to cross-pollinate, so I work with Audubon, I work with the Native Plant Society, number of schools. You know, education has a hard time with field trips these days. A lot of hoops to jump through. So we bring science to students in different areas. I served as the board for the Francis M. Weston Audubon Society, which is our local chapter, their conservation chair for 8 years. I, after Hurricane Ivan moved through this area, and we were having the economic downturn, and a lot of people I knew, young people, were looking for work in the environment. I helped start up the Florida Association of Environmental Professionals again, because we had like a 2-year lull hiatus. I serve on a number of boards. We have a new estuary program in this area that we're very excited about, which we hope will address a lot of water quality problems. And I've served on the technical committee for the Bay Area Resource Council, which recently, within the last 2 years, morphed into this estuary program. So I pretty much have worked in a lot of different arenas within this area.
Have you ever testified as an expert witness in a DOA hearing before?
I have. I've testified twice for the sector plan that we're talking about today.
Okay. Your Honor, I would like to tender Ms. Albrecht as an expert witness in the area of conservation biology, aquatic ecology, and water quality concerns.
Okay.
No
Conservation,
objection.
Biology, aquatic,
Ecology,
ecology, and what was the third?
water quality concerns.
And you have no objection, Mr. West?
That's correct, sir.
All right. I think, given Ms. Albrecht's experience and education and training over the years, I'm satisfied that she meets the standards for qualification to be an expert established in section 90.702, and I will thus allow her to testify in the form of opinion.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Ms. Albrecht, did you participate in any of the community visioning meetings for the establishment of the Escambia Midwest Sector Plan? And if you did, in what capacity?
I did. As somebody that works in this arena, it's exciting when you have a large-scale project where you're looking at the landscape holistically, and that's exactly what the sector plan kind of laid out. Today we're talking about a smaller parcel within, but basically the area from Interstate 10 north to the Alabama border would have an overlay on the Perdita River watershed portion, which is exciting because we in Northwest Florida have a lot of natural lands, but a lot of them have been sliced and diced and are sprawling. And so this was an opportunity to look at the lay of the land, the topography, and actually recognize how the land drains and how swamps and creeks and branches basically come together and protect those areas. So it was an area that had conservation was in the forefront as opposed to being an afterthought.
So you attended meetings and
There were probably, I think I made it to maybe 3, 4, 5. I mean, we all had to sign in, so I'm sure there's sign-in sheets floating around somewhere. But it was exciting because it was really a Cadillac plan for this area.
so because of your involvement, do you think it would be accurate to say that the county has invested a lot of time and resources into making the plan come about?
They have. I mean, that's the thing with plans. It's like if you follow them, you may see the benefits, especially long-term range plans like this. I mean, this is a good chunk of land. And a lot of it is difficult because it's in private hands, but the concept, this overlay, was beautiful because it allowed wildlife corridors, it kept buffer zones, it, moved the density of the landscape to high and dry areas versus low areas. And, basically it was a nice trajectory for our area. I believe Escambia County, they selected a great planner. They had an excellent planner, a guy named Lloyd Kerr, who ran the department, and he saw the value of long-range planning. And he hired this firm, and they had incredible open meetings and stakeholder involvement and positive information as far as making community centers and what do you need there, and keeping sprawl out of these low-lying areas, which is, we never have enough money to fix the problems that I see on the ground. And so it's like, okay, we can mitigate this by avoiding it. So
I'm sorry.
Let me ask, so the original sector plans were in 2011? And that's kind of the holistic approach you're referring to in your testimony, was that original planning?
yeah, it's sort of a
window.
concept of like, I'll turn it into a human response. Instead of starting smoking, maybe it's better to never start. So instead of building in these low-lying areas, perhaps we can design a community that keeps the integrity of the landscape and the community together. And so the sector plan, the final came out in 2011, but I think we had probably 3-4 years worth of work and meetings, and we could see how they were layering all the different information, how many schools would be in this area, how big would the state grow. And keep in mind, or I don't know where you were in 2004, but this area, we had Hurricane Ivan, and Ivan was a direct hit. The next year we had Dennis, and then we had Katrina, which was huge on a much bigger scale. But we were in a situation where we had an opportunity to kind of look at the larger landscape. It was exciting.
Okay.
Thank you.
You weren't the only environmental person that participated in the visioning
Oh no,
meetings?
there were lots of So we had a lot of colleagues. From after Hurricane Ivan, during this process, I was working for the Nature Conservancy, so we were looking at large-scale landscapes and looking at, how to protect our resources. And we get 66 inches of rain here a year, and sometimes it comes down in what they call frog stranglers, really heavy downpours. So you really start looking at how water flows when you're in my line of work and what that water carries with it. So this was an opportunity to actually design forward, especially this part of the county has a lot of timber resources. Now, fast forward 2022, we had the oil spill in 2010, and the Navy Federal Credit Union set up a campus that's going to employ 10,000 people. So that pushed a housing need, which is what's kind of, in my opinion, slicing and dicing this really good overlay of what we have in the area.
So since your expert qualification is in water quality also, what do you see as, we're going to get to the specific subject amendments. They're located in the conservation neighborhood. You're familiar with that land use in the sector plan. What do you see the environmental benefits of maintaining conservation neighborhoods?
So if you keep areas open and you allow like the native vegetation to survive, maybe don't mow your grass, an inch, but maybe let it grow a little taller, all of those help in these big rain events that I just mentioned, capturing water, acting as storm water, slowing water, taking up nutrients, collecting sediment. So it has, open areas have a really big benefit, and especially in the Perdido watershed, which is a relatively lower lying area, and so which is another reason why it hasn't been developed before now, is that it's basically a lot of low-lying timber type areas that are prone to flooding, and a lot of little creeks meander through that area. So when you're driving on the road and you like go down into a dip, that's usually a creek. And the way we cross these creeks, we're causing harm to our water resources because they become little pinch points. We like to culvert things, we should be bridging them. And so we're constricting them. And when you build in density, and I'm talking like a lot of pavement, rooftops, driveways, swimming pools, whatever, sidewalks, streets, whenever you pave that and you get this incredible amount of rain, 66 inches a year, everything that's in the way of the water becomes picked up in that water, and it becomes stormwater. So if you have open areas and this water can go there and slow down and soak in, that's a good thing. And we haven't really done that kind of planning, but that's what was so exciting about the sector plan. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this. We're looking into the future for future growth that also protects the resources. So
I'm going to bring up, or if you could bring up, please, petitioner exhibit 11. I don't know if this was one of the ones that was objected to. Do I do a basis
I'll
for it?
tell you.
No?
11 was objected to, yes.
Okay, so what do I do with it? Do I tell you why I wanted it to use it? Or?
I think the objection was relevance. So, yeah, if you want to explain how this would be relevant to my evaluation of the
Sure.
current
Okay,
opt-out.
Okay. And do that for
provision.
each one that's objected to, just tell you what the relevance is,
Yeah.
okay. The first, I just wanted to show the first page is the Department of Community Affairs. It's their objections, recommendations, and comments report, or their ORC report. If you go to page 18, and this is where I think you'll see the relevance here. When Escambia County adopted their sector plan, or their comprehensive plan, they also adopted their sector plan, so that's why it's combined here. I put on page 18 is the optional sector plan conceptual overlay plan, so that's the sector plan, basically.
Okay. Mr. West? You maintain your objection to relevance?
Yes, Your Honor, this is all done as part of the extensive data analysis that was done as part of the sector plan adoption process, but at this point, it's already in place. So I don't know, I don't see any relevance in bringing this in now.
I think I'll overrule the objection. I mean, it does deal with the, I understand it may be part of the data analysis that that was developed for the 2011 adoption, but it may have some relevance. I'm not sure what it might be at this point. We're pretty early on in this proceeding, so how it may tie in, I'm not sure. I'll go ahead and receive Petitioner's Exhibit 11 give it the weight that it merits as we proceed through this matter. So Petitioner's Exhibit 11 over objection is received in evidence.
Okay, Ms. Albrecht, if you look at page 18, under the objections, I don't know if you can read from that screen. Can you not? You could read off my screen because I could see.
Okay. So the objection at the bottom. Sorry,
It's fine.
I apologize, Your Honor.
Yeah, and the document's going to speak for itself. I don't need to have it read to
Okay.
me. I mean, if you can just
Can I
identify.
explain the context of it?
If you can identify, and she can explain the context, but identify the paragraph so it's clear in the record which paragraph we're looking at, and then
Perfect.
I can read it.
Okay. On page 18, under the objections there,
And let me note, page 18, when you say page 18, the actual number on the page is 15. So I assume
Correct.
we have some title pages that aren't numbered or something of
Correct.
that sort.
correct. So this is 18 in my Exhibit 11.
Yep.
There's an objection where the DCA had said that some of the land uses weren't suitable for the extensive presence of floodplains and wetlands and the native habitat. They mentioned in the paragraph it says, you don't want me to read it, but it says the regional employment districts, neighborhood centers are not suitable for these designations due to the wetlands. So, let's see how I'm going to ask the question, since you can't read it. Since the heavy commercial uses that were the objection in the paragraph 29 would also be allowed under this change to mixed-use suburban, in your opinion, do you think it's appropriate to allow land use changes where these subject properties are now? The similar land use changes?
So, okay. I believe that the landscape and the low-lying areas were recognized in the original sector plan analysis as having some of these sensitive areas. So that's, again, what got us so excited. So I mentioned that I was working with a lot of large landscapes and kind of a holistic approach to addressing contamination, water quality concerns. And so by recognizing that there are low-lying areas within this location within Jack's Branch, which is the sub-watershed that it belongs to, yes, I mean, we were excited because it's like, stay out of the low-lying areas, move to the higher areas, increase density there so that you level everything out, but just lower what you have as far as density concerns in areas that are prone to flooding, prone to carrying the stormwater that we just talked about.
So in this document, DCA went on to say that they were concerned about the drainage to the basin that you mentioned that goes out to the Perdido River. Can you tell me about, and what you know about the Perdido River and why that would be important to consider?
Sure. So the Perdido River is important for a number of reasons. It is basically the boundary line between Alabama and Florida. It is also considered an outstanding Florida water, which is a designation that the State Department of Environmental Protection gave it back in the 70s. And it feeds into a bay called Perdido Bay, and Perdido Bay has some real tremendous problems with pollution from activities having to do with a paper mill. But at this point, you have an outstanding Florida water, and it even has another designation, so lots of titles, lots of layering to sort of protect it, but we're not doing a very good job of protecting it. So the state also considers it waters with special designation. So and the Perdido is a beautiful, wild and scenic river. I mean, Alabama has done a really stellar job as far as putting 24,000 acres along the riparian zone, the area that tends to get wet when we have a lot of rain events or tropical events. And Florida, in the south end of the river, so below, I think one segment is above the interstate, but most of it below, the Northwest Florida Water Management District has put a lot of that area into protection. So we have some of the waterway protected, but you know, everything that happens in our estuary starts upland, inland, and on the land. And so it's important that we protect these buffers, these little feeder creeks that basically start and flow into the river eventually, from also being protected, because they're very sensitive and biologically they're exciting. So thank you.
Okay, so and then if you go to the bottom of the recommendation, the DCA is asking the county to revise the map to ensure the maintenance of water quality and quantity and protection of native habitat. So in your opinion, is it important to preserve land as open space for water quality? Is that important to you?
Absolutely. Buffers are important, riparian zones are important, wetlands, marshes. They're important for our water quality. And if we care about seafood, because pretty much everything that we like to eat spends a part of its life cycle in these areas.
Okay, so I know that you've probably read through this, and since we can't read them here, in your opinion, from this document, do you think that the state was concerned when Escambia County was making the sector plan? They took the concerns of the environment and the natural resources into account when they were designating land uses?
They did, and that's again why we were so excited about it. Kent Wimner, who is Defenders of Wildlife, he's out of Tallahassee. He would come over for a lot of the meetings, and a lot of my biological colleagues and whatnot also would go to these meetings. And again, it was exciting to see that we were projecting, thoughts about growth, how to, I grew up in Miami, so Miami is sprawled, and the poor Everglades have been encroached upon. And I didn't understand it then, of course I understand it now, but I see that growth, that momentum is coming into our area, which is fine. I'm not against growth, but really good planning is wonderful. And we unfortunately don't do a very good job of that, in my opinion, and it's reflected in our waters. We have water quality problems. So, instead of protecting these sensitive areas, this outstanding Florida water, my goodness, why allow this slicing and dicing of the landscape to accommodate growth that could be placed in a place that could be, that could flood? I mean, my goodness, people spend a lifetime buying a house, so you don't want them to lose their biggest investment.
Okay. I think I'm going to go outside of this document then, since, if you could look at, if we could bring up Petitioner Exhibit 12, is that one also? No, that one's not objected to.
And 12 is in evidence.
Okay, this is, you mentioned Lloyd Kerr. He was the certified planner that was the director or bureau chief at the time. This is a growth management agenda from March 17th, 2011, when Escambia was finalizing the land uses for the detailed specific area plan, or the DSAP, before it was eventually approved in September. So if you look at the bottom of page 1, you can see that, that's pretty good.
Right.
Onto page 2. Especially on page 2. Did the county do a site analysis to determine what the boundaries of the sector plan would be, considering the extent and location of natural resources from what you've read in this document?
They did. Lloyd Kerr had, after Hurricane Ivan, which again really impacted our area, Escambia County was going to be replacing 55 bridges. And so I met up with him as soon as I got information about that, to talk to him about how we cross waterways, whether they're branches, whether they're streams, whether they're creeks, whether they're ephemeral or year-round. And we were both on the same page as far as spanning these low-lying areas. So I felt like I had met somebody that had common interests in habitat and water quality and all the things that I value.
All right, let's bring up, please, Petitioner Exhibit 10. I think that was objected to. This is an October 2011 letter from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission.
All right, and Mr. West, do you have a relevance objection to?
It's
10?
the same objection, Your Honor. It's relevant, is not apparent. All of this has been done as part of the adoption process, but that occurred more than 10 years ago. We're dealing with an issue that occurred recently. So all these old documents, they have a lot of the data and analysis that was considered way back then, but I'm not sure what the relevance is to this particular case before you.
Okay. All right, I think for the same reason I explained with regard to 11, this does appear to be related to the Midwest Sector Plan, albeit the original adoption in 2011. I'm going to receive it in evidence, and the parties are invited to tie it into something that I'll be considering with regard to the 2022 opt-out ordinance, but I will receive it in evidence. So over objection, Petitioner's Exhibit 10 is received in evidence.
Okay, so on that page, I'm not sure if you can read that one either, but this specifically talks about the conservation neighborhoods, which is where the subject amendment, subject properties of this amendment are in. It talks about the conservation neighborhood, and it says there that a key component is, can you read that or no?
I can.
Go ahead.
I
and read
can.
it. Go ahead and read
So-
that real quickly.
You're asking me under the
Conservation
conservation.
neighborhoods, yeah.
Okay, conservation neighborhoods is described in section 3.03, have the potential to affect large upland areas. A key component of that is at least 50% will be designated as undivided, permanently protected open space, managed for either agriculture or conservation purposes, and on which the underlying development rights of the open space may have several through a legal instrument that runs with the land. Is that
Severed.
Several.
Yeah, severed.
Severed through a legal instrument that runs through the land. We support the county in this important method of clustering development and providing large open space that may eventually have conservation easement protections. So,
Okay, so in the conservation neighborhoods, they, one of the key components, it says here, is that there's at least, in new subdivisions, at least 50% will have to be preserved as open space. In your opinion, did the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission consider conservation neighborhoods to have an important function for protecting the environment?
absolutely.
Okay, on the bottom of page 1, onto page 2, talks about low impact natural resource areas in the conservation area. And versus the conservation area, if you can read, let me see where. The Florida Fish, the FWCC discusses low impact natural resource areas and versus conservation areas. And they warn about waiting until actual development permitting stays, specifically, for wetland permitting to determine conservation areas. In your personal opinion, why is it important for the county to do long-range planning for conservation areas and not wait until development review stage for analysis?
The horse is already out of the barn at that point. I mean, if you wait until a problem comes up, you know, like let's talk about a hurricane preparedness plan. You're not going to write one until the last minute. I mean, this is a plan that was laid out. Everybody knows what to do. Everyone that participated in this had ample opportunity, and it was a good idea for the environment. I can't speak to a lot of other aspects of this, but as far as the environment, which is my little corner of the universe, I really feel like this was a stellar Cadillac plan.
Have you ever read Chapter 16 of the comprehensive plan, which deals with the sector plan?
I have.
Have you read the part about preserving natural resources? I would imagine you probably read that part, especially protecting waterways and aquatic life. So in your opinion, why are those provisions of the comp plan and in the sector plan, Chapter 16, important to the county to follow through?
Because these concepts were intended to protect the resource and allow the public to have access, but also protect the community that was living there. I mean, we will never have enough money to fix everything that we've impacted. Not saying that we do it purposely, but we tend to alter the landscape where we live. And this sector plan allowed some of those areas that are very sensitive to be protected in a manner that everybody considered valuable at that time. So,
If we could pull up Exhibit 20, which is this chapter that I'm talking about, and go to page 2.
there you go. The environment
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So establish a green infrastructure network of interconnected recreation areas and open space. So, basically, don't slice it and dice it and everybody put up a privacy fence and, completely alter the landscape, but keep it open. Identify, protect, and when impacted by development, restore these key ecosystems. We know, biologically speaking, primary, secondary production determines the health of these rivers, and in doing so, if you protect these first and second order creeks, which are little tiny sensitive areas, that in turn will help the health of the river system. Identify, protect, and when impacted by development, restore wildlife habitat in corridors. My goodness, we have bear, we have panther, we have raccoons, we have foxes, we have all kinds of wildlife that we share the landscape with, and we have migrants that pass through the area or choose to raise their young. A lot of birds, a lot of different species besides us on the planet. And so, we need to just kind of design our landscape and the way we move forward around these organisms, in my opinion. And lastly, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So one of the beautiful things about this sector plan was actually making these small little community hotspots, if you will, so that they were not car-centric, but rather bicycle, walkable communities, all the things that we strive for as we develop or retrofit now. But this was looking forward, with a good plan, and it's being just taken apart bit by bit, in my opinion.
So if we go to page 4, this is in the comprehensive plan, objective FLU 16.4, talks about the environment. And it talks about green infrastructure under the policies. Can you talk a little bit about green infrastructure and why conservation neighborhoods are an important land use to keep in the sector plan?
Sure. So green infrastructure means, low impact development where you concentrate water. Maybe a soccer field would be considered, green infrastructure. And again, having open areas without all these, divisions with roads and fences and whatnot allows a lot of wildlife to also use that area at night when we may not use it during the day. And it allows the public, the community, to have access to these areas when the weather's nice, but when we have a hurricane or tropical downpour or whatever, there are areas that can actually have double duty where they're holding this stormwater and able to allow recharge into our aquifer, which again is connected to our waterways, which again is my bailiwick. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we could pull up for Ms. Albrecht, petitioner Exhibit 5. I'm going to show you some pictures of this area. Are you familiar with this area?
I am.
Ms. Rogers, let me kind of interrupt. So I just to make sure I'm piecing this together
Sure.
appropriately, you're saying that future land use section 16.1.2 and 16.4, as we've discussed here in the last couple of minutes, that the current ordinance is not consistent with these provisions of the Escambia County Code, or the future land use element?
with this chapter is for the sector plan. I'm trying to show what the value was, that what
Oh,
we're losing and what the county is not doing, they're not analyzing the impacts. If you take a property out of the sector plan and you increase the density to an urban density in the area that we'll talk about coming up, what is the effect, what are the impacts? And so I'm trying to show the value, I'm trying to show that the state cared, and the Florida Fish and Wildlife cared before they weren't allowed to comment. I guess that's where I was going.
Okay.
So this is Google Map picture. If you can look up on the right side, you can see the subject property. You can't see all the way out to the highway, but I have some other pictures. Let me open mine up so I'm looking at the same thing.
If you were to orient that north, you would be looking at an angle towards the upper right-hand corner, so.
Yeah, if we just go to the next page. I took a series of them. So there's Highway 29,
Mhm.
and there's the subject property. So you recognize that. And then the dirt road coming off Highway 29 is Cedar Tree. And yeah, I have other witnesses that'll testify to the specifics on this. Okay, if we can go to the next one. Here's a little closer from another angle.
Mhm.
Do you see the neighborhood that's in south of the subject property?
Mhm.
Do you see the bend in the road? That road is Ridgeway.
Mhm.
There's a channel in between, and we'll have more testimony about that later, but what do you see in these pictures? You see the channel for that neighborhood that I pointed out, and that irregular blob in the back. I'll get to that. I don't want to, because of testimony, I don't want to give testimony, so I'll wait on that, although I do live there. Okay, Ms. Albrecht, okay, I'm gonna go to another one. I'm gonna say these. Well, let me see, is there anything else that,
Well, why don't I talk about that for a
yeah,
second?
let me,
So what you're looking at here is you have Highway 29 in the upper right-hand corner, and you're now looking at the parcel that's developed in the forefront, and it's pretty rural. I mean, it's going towards suburban, but those are large areas, large tracts of land. Where the road makes a little wiggle, that's probably a seepage slope. It's probably one of the smaller waterways, and you can see it's kind of going into a heavily forested area. If you're looking really closely, you can see a couple of different colors of trees, and so you can see that there's different species. So there's low-lying areas and there's upland areas there, and so basically when we have a rain event, anybody that lives south of that dip, water is going to flow towards that dip. It's going to go under that road, probably with a culvert, because they're a lot more inexpensive to place. But if you, and then where that dark line that's almost perfectly straight, that's probably the culvert, leads into a forested area. And so Mother Nature, she's pretty good at designing things. What she does is she puts a lot of trees in the riparian areas and then the wetland areas, so that when we have these big rain events, that the roots and the trees and the leaves and the wood and everything that gets dropped out of the trees slows that water down. Slow it down so you don't have erosion. And then it's just basically weeping into that area. So it's a nicely forested area, and it actually, Jack's Branch, this is part of Jack's Branch watershed, goes on the other side of Highway 29, so it's clipped again there, and it goes up pretty far. I think I looked it up, it's 24 square miles drain into this tributary that then enters the Perdido River. So it's,
if we could go to image, or page 6, I think I have some other images that will show some of that.
yeah. So there you can really, this particular image, you can really see on the upper part of the picture where there's like a silvery gray image to the trees. That is, that is definitely a wetter area than what you see where there's like dirt roads, not the red clay road, but the rectangular two-tone and the small, probably dirt pit, that somebody was probably looking for clay or something of that ilk.
Okay, if we can go to the next picture too. These are gonna be a series, you're doing great with the exhibits. If you go to the next one, down, after that. What, in this picture, can you still identify the
Oh.
Highway 29, you have the,
So,
go
yeah,
ahead.
this really kind of depicts the area. So you can see the area that's not developed crosses over 29, reaches up. You've got the main stem of the channel that is where the bend of Highway 29 is, kind of opposite that. And then you have that flowing to the left. You have a little bit of agriculture in the upper left-hand corner, but most of it is a wooded, open area. And there's a lot of wetlands in that particular slide. Now on the right side and the lower part, on the right side of Highway 29 to the east, and then lower where it's developed, it's starting to get pretty dense, but you have a very rural area in that picture.
in that map there, can you see Jack's Branch there?
Mm-hmm.
So,
All of that watershed is Jack's Branch. Everything is flowing together, ultimately coming together, convergence before it enters the Perdido River.
okay, if we go to the next one, and there's the Perdido River on the left, all the way on the left, is that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's all I need from, okay, if we could go to Petitioner Exhibit 15, page 3. This is the backup for the amendment. So here's just a map of it. The property is outlined in gray.
Mm-hmm. So that's a road map, right?
Yeah, that's just a
not a
road map,
waterway
yeah.
map, just for everybody's clarification.
Okay. Going to go down. Okay, if we go to page 5, please. This is a flood zone map, but it's from 2006. Can you tell me your opinion on this map?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of new flood zone maps made after Hurricane Ivan, Dennis, Katrina, Harvey. So I would say, this could have been an updated map. And actually, Escambia County has an excellent GIS department, so they probably could have pulled one together.
Okay, the next page, prime soil on the property.
So that's a real interesting map because the green areas are actually the areas where it would be good to consider building. Note the road that has a little dip in it on Ridgeway there. You see how that's white? That recognizes on this map that, that's an area where it would not be considered prime to plant. Keeping in mind, this is timberland, right? This is not, trees have a really important role in our environment. And so this is telling you where the prime soils are if you were a cotton farmer or such. So, next.
Okay, if we could go to page 65.
So this is a topographic map. This gives all kinds of information. You can see the main stem of the creek.
So just
Jack's
what page was, this was page 7?
We're on page 65
Oh,
of,
65 of 118, okay.
okay.
Okay, so, here, this shows elevations topographically, and it shows the main stem of the creek system as it crosses under Highway 29. It also shows several of the tributaries that enter it, including where that funny little dip in the road is. So that basically shows you that, the dark line, I believe is 150-foot elevation, and you're going down in 10-foot, it might be 100 foot elevations, but you're basically going down in 10-foot intervals. And so you can see how much of that area is drains towards the main stem of the creek, which is what goes under Highway 29, and then it would continue west. But in the upper left-hand corner, where you have this topographic feature that's in the end of Hillock section of this 99 acres, a lot of that area in the upper is recognized as wetland, and yeah, it's low lying, like don't build there.
That's what the symbol is with the spikes on it that is identified.
Those are wetlands, yeah. And there's wetlands on the bottom below Knoll Drive.
So can you explain how the wetlands would be working in this area?
How they would be working is they're there because that's where water pools, that's where water gathers. When we have these big rain events, basically water is going to be moving through that area. Again, every time it meets with another branch, another creek, it's going to grow in size. When you have a blue line with a couple of 3 little dots like you do going through the property that we're talking about in Molino Quadrangle, there's a broken blue line, and there's also one in the upper right-hand corner a little to the west of Pin Oak. Those are ephemeral creeks, so they might not be, like we've in our area, we've recently had a drought now. We're in a cloud this morning, but like probably 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we hadn't had rain in almost 8 weeks, so we were bone dry. Those little creeks would have been bone dry. And now with the moisture picking up again, they might be flowing because our groundwater table was low.
Okay, if we could move to petitioner exhibit 9. I believe this was a contested one also. Can you tell us, Ms. Albrecht, what this is?
That's a swim plan. So again, these plans are really important, especially if you can abide by them, because they kind of put a lot of effort and energy into collecting information and then putting them together and recognizing as a snapshot the conditions of the resource. So in this particular case, Northwest Florida Water Management District put together a Perdido Swim Plan Surface Water Improvement Management Plan. There's one for the Escambia system, there's one for Choctawhatchee, there's one for a number of different bays. And within this document, they're looking at the health of the overall system. I participated with this particular, I've participated with many over the years, and they're updated about every 10 years. So this one would have come out, I think, in 2017. We had, it takes about 3 years to collect all the data, analyze it, and see where the data gaps are.
And
Excuse me, Your Honor. I just want to note this is also one of the exhibits that we objected to, and for the same reasons. And I assume you will.
Let me ask Ms. Rogers, I recognize that this
the connection, yeah.
that this deals with the Perdido River and presumably the surrounding environment, but how does this specifically bear on the sector plan that's currently before me?
So there are two detailed specific area plans in the sector plan, Muskogee and the Jacks Branch. This area is in the Jacks Branch Detailed Specific Area Plan, or DSAP. And we saw from the aerial photos that Jacks Branch was part of that drainage basin. We are in the Jacks Branch drainage basin. And so this report describes, there's a map on there that I would like to show, showing how Jacks Branch is going into the Perdido, and it kind of shows the whole area where this subject area is and the importance of it. It also has information about Perdido River being an outstanding Florida water, and so why it's important to.
But I don't think any of those are in dispute. Would they? I mean, I don't think there's a dispute that the Perdido River's an OFW and that Jacks Branch flows in.
Okay.
I mean, I tend to be fairly liberal in terms of relevance, and you may be able to tie it in. I'll receive Petitioner's Exhibit 9, although, and I'll allow Ms. Albrecht to testify, but you'll need to be creative in convincing me how this will apply in my recommended order.
Okay,
But I'll receive it in evidence. So over objection,
thank you.
Petitioner's Exhibit 9 is received in evidence.
Okay, on page 4, let's see, page 4, I see that you were on the technical and public review, and the other group that you are affiliated with on page 9, the Brim Fishermen Association, is also mentioned. And you did talk about that, so we'll skip down to page 13.
So, if, just FYI, you're looking at Escambia County, which is in light green, and then on the Santa Rosa side, there's a dark green line, and so half the county drains into the Escambia River, and then Highway 29 pretty much follows the old ridge line, which would have been like the stagecoach route back before we had cars and, you know, crisscross the landscape. And so you can see Jacks Branch is one of the first large tributaries to enter the system. I mean, there's small drainages, but this is, you know, clearly a small map just kind of outlining where all the main tributaries are. So you can see there's Cow Devil, and there's a couple other, McDavid and Brushy Creek. So the Brim Fishermen, the nonprofit I mentioned that I inherited, we have, I think, 4 sampling stations on Brushy Creek, and we have several on the Perdido River, and we have several down in the lower river, and then we have several in the bay. So we sample that pretty frequently.
Okay, if we could move to Petitioner Exhibit 14. If we can go to page 14. I think we already did that one on 14. Let's see. Let's go to page 21, please. Okay, this is the actual DSAP document for the sector plan, and it's again talking about the sector plan, the conservation neighborhood, I'm sorry. And it talks about clustering. In your opinion, is clustering an important concept, clustering of homes, I'm sorry, is it an important concept for protecting natural resources?
Sure, if it's applied the way it was intended, because the clustering of homes was not to take away from the large landowners' ability of what to do. It was just, hey, cluster in the high areas and avoid the low-lying areas. So, yes. Again, this was a Cadillac plan. I mean, it's discouraging to think how much time and energy it took, not only of the people writing it and the county efforts and energies, but the community that participated in this, and here we are dismantling it while growth is, basically bowling over the area, and it's very disappointing that we can't follow the plan as designed.
So, Ms. Albrecht, are you familiar with the term ecosystem services?
Sure. So ecosystem services are a pretty broad range of services that the environment provide to us that we kind of take for granted. So for instance, trees take up different amounts of rain and water from groundwater, and then they provide shade. They're also taking up nutrients. One of the things that we seem to be doing a lot in the last couple of years in Northwest Florida is cutting down a lot of trees in large, 20, 30, 200 acre plots. And what that's doing is really altering how water moves in our environment, because trees act as vertical stormwater ponds, and they can hold 300 to 400 gallons of water. I mean, a poplar or a willow on a hot July day can take up 300 to 400 gallons of water, and through its leaves and transpiration, make it cooler underneath it. So incredibly important systems, which a lot of people are unaware that they have this service that they provide. Much like marshes will take up, incredible amounts of nutrients and trap soils and sediments, and so ecosystem services is sort of a blanket buzzword that's used a lot, and a lot of our environmental components that make our community amazing and unique are kind of housed within that.
So, in conservation neighborhood, which the subject parcels are, what type of ecosystem services would you expect to find in that type of a land use category?
So I think we've already, made the point of talking about how open areas can be used to trap stormwater, hold water, slowly release water. Trees have a role in this as far as taking up water. They provide habitat. You have a lot of native species that depend on a lot of native trees. And these species, they migrate through the area. They raise their young here. They, basically come here to winter. A number of different things. And then on the ground, you also have a lot of species, gopher tortoises, which were at the time of this document listed, and now they're slowly being delisted. So, a lot of things are changing as we seem to be lowering the bar instead of raising the bar to protect these areas. And to me, that's the real crime, because, several generations out, what are they going to have left to look at and say, oh, this is nature, if we keep slicing and dicing it? So.
Okay, thank you. If we could go to petitioner exhibit 15.
Your Honor,
Yes, ma'am.
could I have a bathroom break?
Yeah, sure. We've been at it, we've been at it, I forgot, that's not the right time, but we've been at it an hour and a half. Why don't we take 10 minutes? Is that, all right, we'll take 10
Thank
minutes, everybody can get something to drink. We'll have it as 10:33. We'll come back at 10:45.
Thank you.